Welcome. We will get started shortly.
Welcome. We will get started shortly.
Hey everyone, we will get started in just a few minutes. We're waiting for just a few more folks to be joining based on our registration numbers, and we will get started within the next few minutes. Thank you so much. Hi everybody, and welcome to our webinar, We Got This WA series, Managing Business Expenses. My name is Sarah Childs. I am the Executive Director of the Business Health Trust, and it's my pleasure to be moderating our discussion today. Business Health Trust provides health insurance solutions for businesses from 1 to 200 employees, and we serve to be a resource to our members. We've partnered with the Chamber on these webinars to help bring expertise directly to businesses and provide resources during this really challenging time. Thank you so much for the Seattle Metro Chamber for putting this together and for the financial support of Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions. The Chamber, as you all know, serves over 2,600 businesses in the region, and most of these are small businesses. So we felt it was really important to, talk and have a panel about how we can be learning from each other in this unprecedented time. And we'll be hearing from a panel of folks that will help shed light on some of the things they're doing, what they're seeing in their roles, and best practices on how to manage expenses, such as credit card payments, loans, rent, and more. A few webinar logistics to go over before we get started. If you need technical help during the webinar, please use the chat box. You can do this to all panelists, and we will do our best to help troubleshoot with you. If you have a question for speakers, please use the question and answer box. We will be recording the webinar, and we will post it to the events page at the Seattle Chamber website later today. One more thing about questions, we will have some really great content today, and know that funding and loans are a big topic right now. There's also a lot changing on a daily basis. So please feel free to ask questions about the content, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. We won't be able to answer specific questions that are specific to a company situation or certain circumstances. I will just mention that we are planning to host an additional webinar early next week specific to the payroll protection program, which we know is going to be a program that a lot of small businesses tap into and likely a lot of questions. So with that, I wanted to introduce our first few folks who will be talking with us about managing business expenses. We have Paul Sussman, founder and principal of Office Lease, and Rachel Marshall, owner of Rachel's Ginger Beer. Hi, you guys, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much. Good morning.
Good morning, Rachel. Really thankful that you guys took the time to talk with us. It's a busy time for everybody, so very grateful for your time. Rachel, as a business owner, what has your experience been so far in COVID-19, and what are some of the lessons that you've learned thus far?
Hi, thank you for having me. That there is absolutely no rule book for this.
There is no rule book. That is really true.
Just unbelievably unprecedented times. And, you know, this is the time where we're just coming out of winter and into our money-making days. So to have that cut short almost overnight is a real sucker punch. But I think probably the thing that a lesson I've learned most is over communicate. Just such a time of uncertainty for our staff. You know, 90% of our staff members are tipped employees and generally live pretty hand to mouth. So when rent's due and there's only $250 in the bank and all of a sudden the governor says you're closed starting tomorrow, that sends panic through our people, which is just awful. I'm feeling terrible for them. And, you know, how many of these people have a safety net? I bet not very many.
So what are some of the things that, as you've been navigating this as a business owner, that you have done to manage your expenses, talk with landlords, banks, etc.?
I think first thing we did was go to the landlords right away and say, here's our situation, here's what our cash flow looks like. We are not going to be able to pay you on time. I suggested to landlords, and I've gotten mixed reviews. I have 7 commercial landlords. I said, why don't you furlough our rent for April and May and then amortize it out over the life of our lease? So you're made whole, but we get some temporary cushion. Once again, varying feedbacks from them, but quite a few of them were positive. And, you know, of course, these landlords also have bills to pay, and they have notes that they owe the bank, so they're not flush with cash. They need to be made whole as well. But of course, small business shouldn't be the one that absorbs all of the cost of a national, international tragedy.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, tangible kind of solution or way to approach things, is to do the amortization over the rest of the lease. I've heard a couple other people doing that as well, and I think, you know, it has been mixed messaging. Or mixed received or results. But one of the things that I've heard people say is, you know, you just don't know until you ask, and kind of going back to your over communicating on all levels there. So Paul, you represent businesses looking to lease or purchase commercial space. What has your experience been so far in this situation? And a follow-up question is, you know, what are your clients having trouble doing, and what are you guys doing around this?
So I've got a couple of roles. First of all, I've been representing tenants here for a few decades and been through several ups and downs. But as Rachel very correctly points out, what we're dealing with is completely uncharted territory, and it's global. And so on several fronts, hopefully 6 months or a year from now, we'll look at the rearview mirror and realize that we lived through a really remarkable slice of history. But we're not at that point where we can look at it dispassionately at this juncture. I also serve on the board of a 20-year-old not-for-profit called Village Reach, which has about 180 employees, bulk of whom are in Africa. And in a call 2 days ago with the executive committee, that I liken what's going on pretty much to hypothermia. And with hypothermia, what happens is the body directs all of the blood supply to the vital organs in an attempt to keep it alive. And that's essentially what we're seeing with companies today. They have really, and they, without much warning, unless you really listened to Bill Gates 5 years ago on a TED Talk, without much warning, they've all had to go into absolute crisis mode, which means figuring out however you can what it takes to keep the core functions operating. We're counseling our clients to approach their landlords in a very collaborative way. There's a clause in just about every lease called the force majeure clause. It's French, which means outside force, or perhaps act of God. But in most leases, the recourse to an act of God provision does not include financial obligations, i.e. rent. At the same time, if you're a good tenant and one that has, got a decent relationship with your landlord, they should. I'm seeing a note here that my audio is not very good.
I'm hearing you pretty well.
Would it be better? Would it be better were I to call in?
I'm hearing you really well.
Yeah,
Okay.
Let's continue. But attendees, if other people are having difficult time, please let us know.
Okay. Well, I'll hold up. I'll hold up the mic. So, in your lease, people don't have the time to get into the legalities of whether or not a force majeure clause, whether a force majeure clause would apply in this. And I'm counseling all of our clients to approach their landlords in a very collaborative fashion, because everybody is in this thing together. Most people are interested in the well-being of the organizations that makes our community tick. And that means these are mostly small tenants. Communication, Rachel, is absolutely key. I also liken it to if you're stuck on a plane at the gate or on the tarmac, the pilots that we really appreciate are those that keep us really well informed as to what the problem is, and that as much as they do. So as a business leader, that communication is really, really important. But at the same time, if you're a tenant and you're talking to a landlord, and if you're a tenant and you're talking to a landlord, transparency is really important. Most of us have a pretty well-tuned BS meter. If people feel that you're just taking advantage of a situation, the yellow flags will go up. If they do understand that you're doing everything you possibly can to preserve the lifeblood of your organization, they're more likely to be receptive. So it's a case-by-case basis. I really think it's a case-by-case basis. But be human. I think if you appeal to people's better side, you also need to understand that they have mortgages to pay. So they are in negotiations with their banks. In some cases, depending on how leveraged they are, some of them do not have a lot of flexibility. So I think approaching people and understanding what their situation is, in some cases, as Rachel mentioned, you can get your rent deferred. Maybe it's amortized to the period of the lease. Maybe you add a couple of months or a few months to the end of the lease, and it's not necessarily added. And in some cases, we know of landlords who are literally just forgiving it. And if they do, that's not going to be forgotten in the future. There's a really big goodwill factor here. And if anything good is going to come out of this whole experience that we're dealing with, hopefully, it is the realization that there is good in people, and it's not all necessarily just about the money.
Yeah, I really like your analogy of the pilot communicating. I can picture myself on an airplane sitting on the tarmac and how frustrating that can be, but so much better when there's that communication. What a good theme both of you seem to be honing in on there. So we mentioned the payroll protection program earlier, which, we'll get into a little bit more later in the program. Have you heard of people asking landlords to consider, being able to use those funds now so that they can use that program, and then, possibly asking for rent deferment starting in June if we're still in this situation? Is that something that either of you have heard about so far?
You mean the payroll, the PPP?
Yeah, and specifically, are people starting to think like, okay, if I get the PPP, I will be able to pay my rent, but I might have cash flow issues in June if this continues, and having some flexibility in June, July, as rents are going to be due.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I think that there's still so much uncertainty with the PPP, and the rules are actually still being written, from what I understand from my banker. So I think everybody's a little bit in the dark about that, and certainly not negotiating with landlords with that in mind yet. I will say, though, the couple landlords who have not budged much with us, and of course are the ones that are the most leveraged with their banks, so I sympathize. They've said, hey, are you taking advantage of these programs? And I said, yes, but they're not available yet, and rent was due yesterday. So little cart before the horse, maybe, is how I'm feeling about PPP.
Yeah, it's hard. I think everybody's kind of just waiting for things. I know I've talked to a lot of bankers that are also feeling the pressure and wanting to get answers out, but it's a constantly evolving process. What does Mayor Durkin's commercial eviction moratorium mean for small businesses?
Just to step back on the PPP, there is a fair amount of documentation you need to get ready. Mm-hmm. And what, at least our bank, because I've inquired as to what's involved, and so that I can also counsel our, clients of ours who are scrambling and for whom any information, good information, and our accounting firm actually came out with some very clear-cut, useful information and sheets about it. You do want to get on the list, because what they're doing is the banks have you sign up online for a call when they do get their act together, when everything's put together. And there's a bunch of documentation, including personal financial statements and other corporate data that you want to get ready for when you do finally get that call and you can apply to the loan to the bank. So it's just a useful thing to have in your hip pocket if one is going to apply. So the question was with regard to some sort of moratorium on evictions, commercial evictions, and mortgage payments.
Yes. So what does Mayor Durkin's commercial eviction moratorium mean for small businesses?
Well, you might not be evicted immediately. I think it's for 60 days or something like that. But if your relationship has got to the point where your landlord's talking about eviction, it either means that you're not providing the value as a tenant that you thought you would to the landlord, or the landlord is, for whatever reason, maybe he wants to get or she wants to get the space back. But if you get to the point of eviction, that is an absolute last resort. It just means you can't be kicked out for whatever the prescribed period is not a solution to whatever your long-term business prospects are.
Right.
And, it does not mean to say that after that, there might not be other penalties under the law for failing to perform under the terms of a lease, and it depends on how the lease is written. So if you get to the point of eviction, something has failed.
And this is Rachel. From what I understand on that moratorium, even if you can't be evicted in 60 days, eviction can still go on your permanent record, and nobody wants that filling out a new lease application.
Right. It's a very good point. Rachel, do you have suggestions as a business owner, to a business owner who might not be sure how to approach their landlord or a bank about having trouble making their payments this month?
Could you say that last sentence?
Yeah, what advice would you have for a business owner who just isn't sure how to have a conversation with their landlord or bank about not being able to make their payments right now?
I would kind of lay out the way that the business year works, that we are just coming out of Q1, which is generally the softest quarter of the year. Everyone makes their money in summer and then gets a bump at Christmas, which holds them through until hopefully spring break starts. So people do not have money in the bank. Even the biggest operators in town don't have money in the bank. And I would be transparent and say, here's my P&L, here's my balance sheet. This is what we're working with here. I want to pay you. I just can't pay you yet. But never screw you, I'm not paying you.
Mm-hmm. So opening that dialogue in the how.
Yes, transparent and over communicate. What else can you do? I mean, throw yourself at their feet.
Yeah. Yeah, the communication piece I think is really huge, and figuring out a plan to the best that you can right now seems to be what I'm hearing both of you say, and communicating that pretty as many times as you can, right? In this, there's
and could it even be, I owe you $8,000. I can give you $2,500 of earnest money. I don't know when I can give you the rest, but here I'm making an effort.
Yeah, that's a great thing to point out as a tangible thing people can do. Great. Well, with that, I want to also welcome our next panelist, and we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the lending side of things, talking about credit cards, and hearing from the bank perspective on things. So I would like to introduce our two speakers, which is Jimmy Ng and Carrie Schroeder. Carrie is the Seattle Market President of Bank of America, and Jimmy is Senior Business Banking Relationship Manager, VP at Key Bank. Welcome, both of you. Thank you very much for your time. Very much appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
So,
yes, absolutely. Thank you.
I'd love to hear from both of you, and maybe start with Carrie, how your bank is supporting businesses in this time.
Sure, I'm happy to share that. For a long time, Bank of America has had a program in place for helping clients who are experiencing financial distress. And with the pandemic that is now impacting so many of our clients across the country, we have expanded that program and are doing our best to make sure that all of our clients know that it is there and that they have the ability to access it. So for small business clients in particular, for clients that have loans or credit cards with the bank, they can reach out to us to request to defer payments. If they're having financial difficulties at this time, they can request refunds on late fees. For checking and deposit accounts, some of the assistance that we're providing includes waiving overdraft and non-sufficient fund fees, as well as account maintenance fees. We're not putting forth any negative credit bureau reporting for clients who take advantage of our client assistance program. And for clients that might need more assistance, we are evaluating those needs on a case-by-case basis. If a payment deferral isn't enough, and there's a broader restructuring that needs to happen of the client's credit facility, that is something that they would discuss and work through with their banker on a case-by-case basis. But at least in this interim period, while we are all under this stay safe and healthy order, we know that our clients are having a difficult time with businesses being closed and want to do what we can to help.
Great, thank you. Jimmy, talk to us a little bit about what Key Bank is doing to support businesses during this time.
No, absolutely, and thank you again for having me. Very similar to Carrie's point, specific on the business side, over communication, and I love what Rachel said earlier is there is no rule book, so we're all working together here. So there's generally a great consensus of the willingness to communicate and to reach out and to help. For KeyBank and I specifically, we've basically been similar to the comment of deferments and modifications. We're reaching out, and as clients are calling us, go through the process of submitting requests for deferments on principal and interest on term loans, commercial mortgages. I do also want to highlight at the federal SBA level, banks will have more information in the next day or so, but at the federal SBA side, clients that have existing SBA loans with their lenders may have an opportunity for some forgiveness versus deferment. So more news is coming out. News is ever changing and evolving, absolutely. But yeah, we're committed to making sure we're here for our clients as well.
So, Jimmy, you mentioned a little bit about federal loans and how things are constantly changing. Could you maybe talk just, very high level briefly of what programs are, being talked about or in the process of being rolled out?
Sure. I'll back up chronologically. About 3 weeks ago, when President Trump enacted the disaster relief status, the federal SBA, so that's the SBA.gov, not done through a bank, but business owners and nonprofits can apply for the SBA EIDL. So that's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan directly with SBA. There's been such volume through their website that admittedly it's been frustrating and has crashed, but SBA has revamped the website. And so there's still an opportunity there for business owners to take advantage of that. Clearly, those are different terms and conditions than the Paycheck Protection Program, but that's one resource available to business owners. Additionally, on the SBA website, that there's now an additional $10,000 advanced bridge loan program that they have on the federal side. The Paycheck Protection Program, this has been arguably the hottest topic this week alone, and participating SBA lenders similar to Key and Bank of America, we're going to go live with applications tomorrow. So that's the go live date from the SBA side. And that is where, and I'm sure we'll get into this, the Paycheck Protection Program, there's a forgiveness clause where business owners may have the amount that they qualify for be forgiving as long as the next 8 weeks is being utilized for payroll expenses, utilities, rent, and mortgage interest. I want to make sure I guide people towards the official federal site, the Treasury website and the SBA site, because there has been some changes the last couple of days, and we still anticipate some minor updates.
Great, thank you. And I just added in the chat panel for all the SBA website, so it's sba.gov, to get some of that information. And, again, just reiterating that things are really quickly changing. So, Jimmy, I've been asked a couple of times for a layperson's version of the PPP or Payroll Protection Act program. Is this accurate, that this program is really designed to help people keep paying their employees over kind of an 8-week period of time and provide some funds to pay rent, utilities, those sorts of things?
Yes, the spirit of the CARES Act and specifically the Paycheck Protection Program is to, the SBA wants businesses to, quote, help assist in keeping their facilities open and keeping payroll and keeping employees on the job, and in a lot of cases hoping to rehire their workforce that was recently perhaps furloughed or laid off. So that's the spirit of the PPP, if you will.
Great, thank you. As a non-banker myself, I always like to try and distill things down so at the level that I can even understand them. So thank you.
Sure.
Carrie, you mentioned some of the things that Bank of America is doing around, credit cards, line of credit, deferment. Could you talk a little bit more about how people would go about tapping into those programs and what exactly you guys are doing related to credit cards and lines of credit?
Sure. If you find yourself needing assistance, there's a couple of ways that you can tap into the program. We have put information about our client assistance program on our website, so you can log in to banksamerica.com and look for information there. If you were a user of online banking or Cash Pro, our commercial platform, there are also ways to request assistance there. Or, of course, you can, if you have a banker that you work with on a regular basis, pick up the phone and give them a call, and they will be happy to assist. So we're trying to make sure that all of these programs are as accessible as possible to all of our clients, and that there's a streamlined way for them to access it. Again, the standard sort of starting program is really geared towards waivers of late fees, deferrals of payments. On the consumer side, in addition to payment deferrals, we have also made a commitment that we are stopping all foreclosure actions, et cetera, associated with this. So, again, if a client needs assistance beyond the deferral program, that's a conversation that they should have with their small business banker or their business banker to talk about the particular situation and try to come up with a solution that's needed. But it all starts with a conversation. We've heard it a couple of times today. Transparency is simply the very best approach. I think that I can speak for most bankers and most lenders in this situation. We understand the struggles that our clients are having right now as a result of all of this disruption. So you are not alone, and I think we will all be working together to try to figure out the right solution. Banks do operate in a regulated environment, so we have to be mindful of those regulations. The loans that we make are made with the money of our depositors, and so that's why these individual beyond the deferral process, why those decisions have to be made on a case-by-case basis based on the individual facts and circumstances of each request. But I really do encourage you to be transparent with your lender, make sure that they understand what your unique circumstances are so that they can do their best to help. And to Jimmy's point about the Paycheck Protection Program, the rules are absolutely still changing. My best advice to all business owners is as this program gets up and running, your path of least resistance, the place where you're going to get the best execution under the Paycheck Protection Program, is to start with your relationship bank. They will, in the bank that you do business with today, will already have cleared the hurdles regarding know your customer regulations and anti-money laundering regulations. If you haven't already established a relationship with a lender, they're going to have to clear all of those hurdles first, and that will slow the process. So if you've got a solid banking relationship and they're participating in the program, that is your best path for execution. And we're all still learning the rules. So, the good thing is that all loans under this program are going to have the same terms, because that is governed by the SBA and the government's rules, not the individual lenders. A few things to think about if you're thinking you may be eligible for the program. We are encouraging clients to gather a few pieces of information, not to send it in now, but just have it ready when the application process starts. So gather information on what your 2019 payroll was. Get a list of your 2019 employees and gather the 1099s if you have them at hand. Have information together about your health insurance costs, any premiums that are paid by the business to provide that group health plan to your employers, information about your rent, and retirement benefits. Those are all things that can be covered under this Paycheck Protection Program. So if you have those ready, you'll be in a position to be able to create that application quickly once the starting gun fires.
Great, and I just took a couple quick notes, as I'm sure a lot of people are, of the things that you just mentioned. I really, one of the things I want to highlight that you said that I think is really important is just really contacting your relationship bank because of the know your customer and those sorts of regulations. I have heard some companies trying to talk to multiple banks and who's going to be first and such. And I think that's an important piece that a lot of folks are forgetting about, and just really leaning into that relationship where you already have a banking relationship.
Yeah, there's no point in shopping for this. All the terms are going to be the same. So,
Yep.
you won't get a different deal from one bank versus the other. So path of least resistance is usually a good place to start.
Yeah, it's an interesting program because everyone really is in the same boat. All the lenders have the same terms. Everyone is waiting for the same timeline. So I think the notion of getting first in line really is not accurate. Making sure that they are communicating with their bank and getting things prepared so that they can work as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Paul mentioned early on that personal financial statements were one of the things they're recommending gathering. I just wanted to make clear, as we understand it as written today, there are no personal guarantees for loans under the Paycheck Protection Act. So, while your bank may ask for that or may have it on file already, there is not an expectation that individuals will guarantee. Now, if your business is formed as a sole proprietorship, and that is and all of the financials are combined, that would be a case in which you would need that documentation.
That's very helpful. Thanks for highlighting that. I also did want to give Jimmy the opportunity to also talk about what you've learned around the Paycheck Protection Program right now. I saw you mentioned to the chat that another form that you are all thinking is going to be needed is the 2019 quarterly 941 forms. So Jimmy, tell us a little bit about what you guys have learned in this process, or augmenting what Carrie has mentioned.
No, certainly. As Carrie stated, very accurately there, it's a fluid situation. So what we've been asked as SBA participating lenders is to communicate with our clients and business owners to start gathering those informations, which includes the 19 year-end P&L and balance sheet, payroll records, the breakdown from January of 2019 up until February of 2020. I want to highlight, if you're a business owner that was started only early this year or only have several months of operational timelines in late 2019, that's fine too. You're eligible if you had a business started even in January or February. So obviously that's a shorter amount of records to go through, but newer businesses that were established are eligible as well. So P&L balance sheets, monthly payroll records, January of 19 through February 2020. And it was recommended to have business owners gather their quarterly IRS 941 form, which is not in a tax return, FYI. There was also some business owners with some confusion as to where they can find this form. Businesses that use a payroll provider can easily get it from the payroll provider, but it is a form that's filed quarterly from a payroll tax standpoint. So those are what we've kind of got out there in this last week. We can have to help our clients start gathering, ready for the application for them to apply and upload tomorrow.
Great, thank you. So one question for both of you. Could you talk about who will be eligible for the PPP? You mentioned nonprofits and businesses. Are sole proprietors going to be eligible? And, is there a different timeline for that application process?
So I'll start with what we know right now. And of course, this is all subject to changes as the rules evolve with with Treasury and the SBA. But as we know it at the moment, businesses, nonprofit organizations, veterans organizations, or tribal organizations with 500 or fewer employees are eligible for the program. Note that your bank will not be determining eligibility. We will be providing information to clients, but really you will need to look at the rules that are put out by SBA and make your own decision about whether or not you are eligible. Banks are being asked to provide some validation and verification of information that is provided. But fundamentally, we want business owners to be making those decisions for themselves before they start the application process. Applications for businesses open up on the 3rd. I believe the program will be available to gig workers and those who are self-employed, but that application process will start a week later, so April 10th. right now is when that is expected.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. So sounds like tomorrow is the 3rd. I can't believe it's already April 3rd almost. Is when kind of that first round will be open for nonprofits and businesses that are not self-employed or gig workers and self-employed the following week. So going back a little bit, kind of posing the same question I posed to our other panelists earlier, what suggestions do you both have for a business owner who isn't sure how to approach their bank about, having trouble making some payments? Maybe start with you, Jimmy.
Yes, well, clearly this scenario has affected many people across the world. So it's not taking any bank by surprise. We early on knew that we had to make sure clients spoke to us and communicated to us so we can work something out. Carrie, again, brought up a great point earlier. We are on a case-by-case basis, depending on the credit facility and each business's situation. A lot of it, we're able to do some deferments, some modifications on their loan. Again, case by case, some commercial mortgages and term loans, non-SBA, we're able to do a 90-day deferment, principal and interest. In some cases, on the business credit card side, defer 1 month's worth of payment. But the most important thing I think I can relay on this call today is we want our clients to work with us and vice versa. We're going to work with them, but we also want to know what's the strategy. Have you kind of going back to the conversation earlier about your core functions? What are your expenses going to look like? Have you done an updated pro forma or projections? Work with us to know what your expenses, what your margins are, how they're going to change so we can work with you.
Great. Thank you. This has been really helpful for me to get a refresher on a lot of this stuff, and there's so much information flying around. I'm really thankful for all 4 of you for joining us today. I did want to remind folks that we will be having a few more webinars next week on maintaining staff morale and reviewing the economic impact analysis that the Chamber MBHT commissioned a study on, actually that came out a few weeks ago and is playing out pretty similar to what was projected. You can register for those at the Chamber website. And we also will be doing a webinar early next week on the PPP. At that point, things will be out. We will have more information, and we will be able to talk with maybe even some of the folks on this call or other bankers that will have more information around the specifics. So with that, I would love to give everyone a few more minutes back in their day. And if you have additional questions that pop up after this webinar, please feel free to email info@businesshealthtrust.com, and we will do our best to field those questions to the experts that have joined us today. Thank you and have a great day.
Cheers, everyone. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.